Well, it's Thursday again, and you're here at Mortgage Minute with Art Alvarez. He is our guru, taking us through the maze of what's happening in the world of home loan finance. And he's a genius at what he does. And the cool part about this is he has steadfastly remained on track during some of the the most unusual times in our financial history with what's going on with the rates high and the property values high and not much inventory out there. He has continued to make things happen for you as a home buyer. And with that, I want to bring him in because he has more good news today. Because I don't know if it's like I shared a little something with him last week, and it looked like a mountain, and it looked like we had maybe gotten over the top of that mountain. So I'm looking forward to hearing his thoughts on that. Hey, Art, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Jeff. How are you?
Good. You are out in the community all the time. We were just talking before you came on air about, you're at this function, this function. What's the feeling out there? If you had to say, okay, what's the pulse out there of the community? What would you say it is? Positive, negative? Is it neutral? What's going on out there?
I would say it's getting to be sort of cautiously more positive, which I'm going to comment on a little bit when we talk about where the market is, because I think folks are starting to settle into where we've been in our existing environment in terms of home prices and rates. And so I think as a consequence, there's a little bit more activity occurring in terms of home sales and transactions. And so I think, like I said, I think people are just starting to settle into realizing we are where we're at. And, if you want to get into owning a home and so forth, you got to figure out a way to jump in now. So.
Yeah, you've been doing this for what, 4 decades plus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Long time.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and you've seen all these types of scenarios, where there's inventory is low, money's hard to get, but people still buy homes, don't they?
They do, because, life goes on, and, you could be locked into a 2.5% rate, but at some point, maybe your family's growing and so forth. You get to a point where you got to do something. Maybe that home's no longer adequate. And same with home buyers. I mean, there's my theory has been for a while that while many home buyers are on the sidelines waiting for rates to fall because they think they're unaffordable, there's I believe, a greater percentage of those buyers who probably could qualify at today's levels. And it's more of they don't want to take on that payment, even though a guy like me can look at them on paper and determine they can afford to do it. In other words, I run into that more often where I'll be pre-qualifying somebody. In fact, I'm working on one now where I'm confident I'm going to come back to them and say, you can qualify for this much. And they're telling me they only want to buy this much, because there's some families, some borrowers out there just say they don't want to live for their mortgage payment, but at the same time, they're antsy to buy. So we've got to figure out how to make those two parameters kind of come together and make it happen. So.
Well, that's what's, I think, with your history and your knowledge and expertise. I mean, that's the magic that you bring to the table of like, hey, I really can afford to do this, because otherwise I'm giving my money every month. I'm going to pay something every month for my housing. Either I give it to a landlord or I invest it in something that potentially could go up in value. I mean, has real estate ever really gone down in value long term?
Long term, no. Of course, in '08 is what everyone remembers most recently. But even then, I mean, there was a belief at the time after the crash of '08 that we thought we wouldn't see values rebound to the levels they were before then for maybe decades. Well, guess what? We blew way past that, a few years ago. So that was, even that extreme move downward turned out to be, relatively temporary.
Well, I know you've got some great information for us today. We're going to talk about some things. So I'll just turn it over to you. But before I do that, I want to let people know, hey, if you're here live, this is a live interactive show. Art is here to give you answers to questions that might come up during the conversation he's having today. And if you're here after the show, please make sure to put your comments, whether it's YouTube or Facebook, in the comment section. And again, Art will follow up with that. And with that, Art, I'm going to jump out of here and I'm going to turn it over to you. Have a great show.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Hello, everyone. Art Alvarez at MortgageWorks with this week's Mortgage Minute. As you probably know by now, if you've been watching our program for a while, we like to jump in to kind of give you an update on where the market is, both the bond market as well as mortgage rates. So we'll get right into that. And the last week or two has been pretty, again, relatively optimistic. Here's our rate grid. We try to keep this updated daily where you can see where current rates are. And these rate levels have brought back a little bit of enthusiasm to the market because they are lower than where we have been in recent months. Last month or two, there was some real concern when things like the 10-year Treasury bond yield was approaching 5%. Well, guess what? It's come back off of that quite a bit. And these rates on our rate grid reflect that move for the better. And, Jeff's going to pull up the 10-year bond yield chart. And it tells a pretty interesting story. Of course, this chart, you can see there's that trend downward from last Friday when we were, getting up there, in the high, over 4.5, and now we're down in the 4.14 range. So a nice move down from where we were just a few weeks ago when we were, touching 5%. So what is causing this recent improvement in bond yields and as a consequence, mortgage rates? Best way I could sum it up is, in fact, on the next slide that Jeff's going to pull up, I put on there, can you spell weakness? Probably true that most people can spell that, but what do I mean by that? Well, this week's economic data points are kind of consistently showing some weakness developing in the economy. Earlier this week, factory orders were down, which of course is a major economic data point as it relates to the economy. Most importantly, JOLT. Now remember, JOLT means job openings and labor turnover. Well, the JOLT number this week came out at a 28-month low. Only 8.7 million job openings in the month of October. Again, that's a 28-month low. It's been consistently well over 9 million for months. So that really helped improve bond yields because, as it indicates in my next data point, market observers are pretty much convinced that the Fed's primary focus as to what they're going to do going forward with rates in terms of the Fed funds rate, either raising it further or continuing the pause, which, by the way, folks, the Fed funds rate has not been raised since July. Keep that in mind. Recall that that's the case. So the idea here is the market observers believe the Fed, their primary focus is the labor market. So the theory is that if the Fed sees weakness in the labor market and growing weakness in the labor market, that could give them reason to back off on any more rate increases and potentially start lowering the Fed funds rate. For the rest of this week, tomorrow is the big day, the U.S. employment report and the unemployment rate. That'll be reported on Friday. Now, the financial news last week or two has been pretty jubilant, pretty enthusiastic about rates are falling and making predictions about the market's going to start, a housing market's going to start rebounding. I find that a little bit interesting, a little bit humorous almost, because as a reminder, bond yields, mortgage rates, we're simply just back to mid-year levels. I mean, we were at that 4.14 10-year bond yield middle of the year. In fact, you go back to April, we were in the low threes on the 10-year bond yield. So I'm not trying to, dampen everybody's enthusiasm, but after sort of, getting up there close to 5 and, on the edge of the cliff, if you will, yes, we've come back down nicely, but we've only come back down to where we were, 3 to 6 months ago. I think we still have a ways to go to really see, a big, a big push in terms of the housing market improving. But nonetheless, it's good news, obviously. And I think we're starting to see some increased activity in home buying, people more interested in getting pre-qualified for a mortgage. And that's why in this last bullet point, I put a question really, will sellers capitulate? In other words, my belief is I think we're starting to see some evidence that the market, the participants, both home sellers, home buyers, are settling into, basically accepting the current conditions. Now they're improving a little bit, but accepting that we are where we are, and that life goes on, and they need to start making some decisions about either if they need to sell the home, maybe they should go ahead and do that, or if they've been on the sidelines about buying, that embrace the current conditions get with experts, a good agent, somebody like us on the loan side, and get some help and let us help you strategize how to get into home ownership sooner than later. So that's where the bond market and mortgage rates are right now. And so with that, I think we're going to bring Jeff back because we've got a couple of interesting questions this week that we've been presented with that I'd like to address.
Before I have that question for you, which I think are some really great questions, the one thing I want to ask you is when we talk about, the rates were even better, the 10-year was even better back in April, it almost makes me think about, when we first jump in a pool, there's that shock, it's cold, and we're like, ooh. But then after a while, it's like, hey, it's pretty nice in here. And I'm wondering if that's kind of what's happened. As you say, we're settling into, hey, this is now the new reality. And we've learned to understand that and say, let's move ahead. Like you said earlier, it's like life goes on. We still have families that grow and, conditions change. And do you think that's it? The pool is just now becoming a little more comfortable?
Well, yeah. In fact, I think that's a great analogy, Jeff. I wish I had thought of that. I'll let you take credit for it. But yeah, I think that's a great analogy because that's what I find so interesting about how everyone's reacting now. The media is they're being cheerleaders, which is fine. Like, okay, we're finally turning the corner. This is really going to spur, more home sales. Even though we're basically back to a level that 3 to 6 months ago, most participants were objecting to, like, oh no, this is too high. I mean, when the 10-year bond yield was in the low to mid threes in March, April range, at least at MortgageWorks, we were able to offer a conforming fixed rate loan under 6. And in hindsight, it's unfortunate some folks didn't grab it at that time. Now we're hoping we're going to get back to that, but even so, even if we don't, we're certainly definitely off of that 7 range going up to 8. At MortgageWorks, we're now in the mid 6s for a conforming loan, which is interesting because, again, as I mentioned, I was watching CNBC this morning and they had posted 30-year fixed conforming loan 7.07. I'm like, no, it's more like 6.5. So anyway, it's good news. And I think that you're right. People, they got over that shock of that cold water in the pool. It's warming up now. And so I think we're going to see more and more people moving forward.
That's great. Well, we have a couple of questions that came in, and the first one is called house hacking or new Fannie Mae down payment rules for 2 to 4 unit multifamily homes. It said that younger prospective buyers believe house hacking is very important in a prospective home purchase. What exactly is house hacking, and how does it relate to Fannie Mae's new down payment rules for 2 to 4 unit homes?
Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, an old guy like me, when we were presented with this question, I had to sort of figure out what the heck is house hacking. Well, it's an interesting concept because I'm still learning what a hack is anyway. But turns out that surveys have been done, and particular generations, the millennials, Gen Z, I guess they've been asked about this, and a good majority of them believe that house hacking is an important part of home ownership. So, of course, what does house hacking mean? Well, what it means is that these prospective home buyers are looking at the scenario where they'll look to try to buy a home and then rent out some of the bedrooms, or if not the entire house, as a pathway to be able to more easily afford the home, by generating that additional rental income. And I actually see that more and more now when I'm confronted with a new prospective home buyer that is a first-time home buyer. A more common question we get now that we didn't used to get so much in the past was, well, if I buy a home and I'm trying to qualify, what if I rent out a room or two? Will that help me qualify? Well, in most cases, no. Border income cannot be used except under some very specific circumstances that most people don't meet. But the point is, it underscores the fact that the younger buyers are starting to think about ways, how can I get into home ownership and what can I do to help soften the blow of that big payment? So again, millennials, Gen Z, they're thinking about, I want to get a home and, I'm thinking I'm going to rent out some of the rooms in order to get some income coming in to help me take care of that payment. Now, in the articles I've read about that, it kind of glosses over the fact that, well, you can't, as a first-time home buyer, buy a home with 3% down and then rent out the whole place. That's a different scenario. If you're going to buy a home and rent it out entirely, then that's an investment property loan. Your down payment's going to be a lot higher, et cetera. But what was interesting about this question that we got was it was just within the last couple of weeks, within less than a month ago, Fannie Mae announced a change in their guidelines for the purchase of 2 to 4 unit properties. That's duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. And I don't think that was an accident. In other words, what Fannie Mae is trying to do there is, recognizing that we do have this locked up housing market, trying to find more ways that the agency can help prospective buyers, in particular new home buyers, get into home ownership. They took the minimum down payment requirement for 2 to 4 unit properties and lowered it from 15 to 25% to 5%.
Wow.
The idea here is, serve the buyer who's, restricted on down payment funds, but who may still want to try to buy now. And in this case, this guideline does require you live in one of the units. But the idea is you can then rent the other units to help get that income coming in to help you offset that overall mortgage payment on the property. So, for example, you're a single person or a couple, you could look for a duplex. Buy that duplex with 5% down, not 15 or 25. And then we can use the projected rental income from the other unit, in terms of qualifying you. Now, there's some restrictions on that. But the point is, even if that doesn't help much with qualifying and the borrower does qualify, they at least can, be assured that they're going to be able to rent out that other unit, get some income coming in, and get that mortgage payment down, the net mortgage payment down after you consider the rental income. Another case would be, a single person, young couple, maybe buy a duplex, and maybe they got another friend, another single person or couple that wants to buy. They buy together. And one person or couple lives in one unit, the other lives in the other unit. Again, between the two of them, they only have to come up with a 5% down payment. Triplex, same thing. You might buy one, live in one of the units, rent out the other two. Or maybe you got a buddy and you live in one unit, they live in the other, and then you rent out the third unit. And then again, of course, with the 4 units, same idea. And then of course people will say, well, do I really want to live next to my tenant? Well, of course, keep in mind you have some control over that because you get to screen your tenants and decide who's the best candidate. But in some cases, those tenants may be other family members, could, again, as I mentioned earlier, friends, et cetera. So you have some control over that. And as a first-time home purchase, I think it's a great way to segue into starting your portfolio of investment property. You can buy that duplex, triplex, fourplex, 5% down, live in one of the units for a while. At a later date, consider moving out of that. Then you're renting out the entire 2 to 4 unit property. And then you buy another home. Maybe that goes back to the traditional single family detached home. And here you go. You've got now your first real estate investment property that you should hang on to because it's going to appreciate over time. And then you'll have those tax benefits from having that investment property, that rental income. So to me, it's a great way to address a couple of issues there. And it's another pathway for people who are restricted on down payment or first-time home buyers to be able to get in home ownership and have that additional benefit of that rental income. So I think it's a great change in the guideline, and I think it directly addresses this housing hack concept that the millennials and the Gen Zs are thinking about.
Does this add an additional page that defines starter home that looks a little different? It's not a starter home, but it's a starter home with more than one unit.
Well, exactly. See, I think that the issue there is that, the market in general, the prospective home buyer pool out there, where they're considering buying a home and trying to figure out what kind of property to buy, they're looking at price levels and what the down payment requirements are and so forth. 2 to 4 unit properties sort of just don't get thought about. People don't think of those as a viable property type for a first-time home buyer to consider. And that is in part because of the guidelines. The guidelines for conforming loans have never allowed such a low down payment. So this is basically opening a door to the first-time home buyer pool as, hey, here's another way to get into home ownership so that you can hopefully ride that ownership into higher equity over time, and as well start generating additional income into your household. Now, what's interesting about that is FHA has already had those guidelines. In other words, FHA, you can buy a 2 to 3, 2, 3, 4 unit property with a 3.5% down payment. But again, it's one of those things that's just under the radar, and most prospective home buyers, and I think even their agents that they utilize to help them find a home, just don't think about that property type. And I think they really should kind of re-look at that and realize it's a very good, viable option for that first-time home buyer. Or even if you're not a first-time home buyer, that buyer who's not owning a home now but is restricted on down payment, this is a good way or a good option to also consider.
That's really a great idea. It seems like it's now takes it out of it's just purely an investment property. Right. And again, it gets in that conversation where your real estate agent said, "Hey, have you ever thought about this?" And have that discussion and look at it and say, "Wow." And you're still making income on this other 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever number of units you're having.
Yeah, it's like a hybrid approach. It's like a hybrid vehicle, I guess, right? I mean, you're buying a home to live in, but you also get to rent it out part of it. And eventually it'll fully become an investment property because, eventually you're probably not going to want to live with your tenants and get your own place away from them. And then, like I said, you've got this great investment property going forward. And then maybe you can add to that with additional investment properties in the future. So
I like that. Buy some pizza and sell the slices. Have to pay for the pizza.
I wish I thought of that too. See?
I like it. Okay. So that's really great news. I look forward to the one little follow-up question I have is what's the inventory look like for those type of units here in the Coachella Valley and Orange County? I think they're probably more abundant in Orange County, aren't they?
Probably so, in LA County and so forth. And yes, one of the things about 2 to 4 units, I think to some degree there's a particular perception about them in terms of that type of property in cities and so forth, where they're located. Are they in areas where, of course, multifamily zoning is allowed? So it might be 2 to 4 unit residential homes that are, in an area with, apartment homes around them and so forth. I think there's probably a perception that 2 to 4 unit properties maybe are a little bit less desirable and located in certain, markets that are less desirable. And there's some truth to that. But you know what? There's some really nice 2 to 4 unit properties out there. You have to be a little more selective. You have to do a little more research and looking around. But there's some good candidates out there for 2 to 4 unit properties that I think a lot of buyers would be more than happy to live in. So,
well, let me ask you one last question before we go to the second piece of this is you said earlier about people being able to qualify. What does it cost for someone to call you and say, "Hey, I want to see if I can get pre-qualified for a home loan"? What's the investment that they have to make?
Nothing. Doesn't cost anything.
So it costs you nothing, gang, to find out, hey, can you qualify for the things that Art's talking about, whether it's a multi-unit or it's a single family home, whatever it is for you. And maybe then when you go out searching for something, it's like, hey, you already know the answer on your side financially is yes. And right. I think it makes you a much better shopper, quite frankly.
Exactly.
I know when I go shopping and my wife gives me a list, I know exactly what to get. So it's always good. If not, I have FaceTime.
Sure.
All right. So you announced a couple of weeks ago in a group we're in offline that the conforming limits have changed a little bit. So the conforming loan limits for 2024, it says a viewer has pointed out that recently they heard the new conforming loan limit for next year will be $750,000, but now they're hearing it will be $766,550. Can you clarify the change and why this has occurred, Art? Because I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. What happens is, first of all, every year, the conforming limit, which again, conforming means the loan limit that conforms to the maximum loan amount that the two federal quasi agencies will purchase from lenders. That's Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So each year that limit is adjusted based on what's happened with median home values over the past year, up or down. And the decision is always made by an agency called FHFA, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, which oversees Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And they always announce their decision late in the year, typically after the Thanksgiving holiday, going into the very end of November, early December. However, it's become a kind of a game over the last several years in the industry where major lenders will try to jump out ahead and basically make a guess on what the conforming limit's going to be and start advertising that and accepting applications on what they believe will be the new limit before it's actually announced. And this year, in the early November, lenders came out and said 750 is the number. And they were starting to take in applications at that limit. But again, it wasn't official yet. And that 750 number was based on these lenders predicting that median home values had increased approximately 3% over the previous year, hence the increase from the 22 limit, which was 726,400, or actually the 23 limit of 726,400. So they announced 750. Well, then here's what happens. After the Thanksgiving Day holiday, FHFA surprises everybody and says, no, it's not 750. It's 766,550. That's a 5.6% increase.
Wow.
Now, no harm done to the lenders who were taking in the 750. That loan amount's okay because it's under the new limit. But the point is there's that gap between what these lenders initially predicted and started doing business with, and then what the actual number turns out to be. So again, this has become a common scenario every year between basically November 1 and December 1, and it's kind of funny to watch. Now, every so often, the agency will surprise everybody, and there'll be a decrease. But that you can usually see that coming because there's wide evidence that property values have fallen, but not in this case. So that's why there was some confusion about the number. But what I want to do is I want to pull up a slide here because I went ahead and prepared that in anticipation of this question. This may be a little bit hard to read, but one of the things I want to distinguish for everybody is the 766,550. That's for a 1-unit property, and that limit is basically available nationwide. Okay, thanks, Joe. So on a 1-unit property, it's 766,550. That's the standard conforming limit. And you can see the limit goes up for 2 to 4 unit properties. So going back to our previous discussion, you could look at buying a home for a 3-unit property with 5% down. That's you can get a loan amount of $1,186,000. So that's pretty good. Now, in addition to the standard, the agencies came up with another category. It's referred to by different terms like agency high balance, as I've got on the slide, or sometimes it's called jumbo agency. What is that? Well, after the crash of 08, the jumbo segment of the mortgage industry completely locked up. Investors, abandoned the product. There was no jumbo loans going on. So the agency stepped in to provide what was intended to be a temporary loan category where they would go ahead and buy loans from lenders at loan amounts higher than the standard conforming limit. However, that varies by county. And so I gave you some here for Southern California. Orange, LA County, you can see a 1-unit property for a high balance agency loan, again, can go up to $1,149,000. San Diego County, it's slightly less at $1,006,000. Ventura, a little bit under $1 million at $954,500. Now, in other categories like the one we're in, Riverside, or the one next to a San Bernardino, or down south Imperial, there is no agency high balance category available. Why? Because the median prices in those counties aren't as high as Orange, LA, San Diego, Ventura. Therefore, in these counties, again, Imperial, Riverside, San Bernardino, we don't have the benefit of a jumbo agency category at all. So if your loan amount's over 766,550, here in Riverside County, you're going to get a traditional jumbo loan. That's a factor only because the down payments have to be a little bit higher and qualifying criteria is a little bit more restrictive. Because remember, when you're doing a conforming loan, you're a first-time home buyer, you can buy a home with a 3% down payment. So look at LA and Orange County. You can buy a home if you're a first-time home buyer. Of course, you're going to have pretty high income. You could buy a home with 3% down payment and get $1,149,000 loan amount. So that's pretty tremendous. Now, what is the implication of all this? Well, this to me supports what I've been saying for a long time. The agency, the FHFA, raised these limits to account for an average, and this is nationwide, increase in median prices of about 5.8%. So what that underscores is something I've been saying for a while. Home values have not dropped. In fact, nationally, the median price of homes has gone up 8 straight months in a row. So there's still been all this talk about home values are going to fall. It just hasn't happened. Now, The prediction is when rates do start to fall, then home values are going to fall because that inventory is going to start to grow, dramatically. I'm not a believer in that because it's not a case where we're going to go from 6.5 to 5 and we're going to suddenly go from 2 to 3 months inventory to 6 overnight. That's not going to happen. I think the increase in inventory is going to be more gradual. And so as a consequence, when rates do start to fall, I don't think that's going to trigger much of a decrease in home values. I would argue they're going to go up even more. And in my mind, talking about our opening segment where the 10-year bond yield was under 4 and low 3s and early this year, and you could actually get a conforming loan under 6, in hindsight, boy, some folks probably should have jumped at that because they would already be enjoying this increase in home values that have occurred since then and would enjoy even more if rates fall further. So to me, this increase is another signal that if you're on the sidelines, particularly as a buyer, you might want to rethink that. Figure out ways to get into home ownership now. We can help with that. That way you can get into ownership now. And then if I'm right, which I could be wrong, but if rates, when they do start to fall, if home values go up further, you're going to be even better off. And of course, if you use strategies like these temporary buy downs, a 2-1 or 3-2-1, that gives you that one-sided bet, gives you a 2 to 3 year window. Get that loan now, have a below market rate and payment for the first 2 to 3 years. That gives you that window to refi into a lower note rate when rates do fall in the next couple of years. In fact, I had another success story on that strategy in this past week or so. I had an agent call me, wanted me on a borrower I already pre-qualified for her, alerted me they needed a pre-approval letter. They're going to make an offer on a home at $800,000. And she told me they were going to offer $770,000. And because they've been on the market for a while. I said, no, don't do that. Offer the full list price. Get that $30,000 as a credit, and then we'll set up a 3-2-1 buy down. In these particular numbers, that would save the borrower $1,100 a month the first year over a market rate. Well, they went ahead and tried it. They were successful. They opened escrow 2 days ago. We've got that loan in process, 3-2-1 buy down at that 800 price level. And their first year rate is under 4%. They're saving $1,127 a month their first year in payment over if they had taken that concession in a lower price and just got a market rate loan. So again, I know I've been harping on this for a long time, but if you're a prospective buyer, you really ought to consider that strategy and try to get into home ownership sooner than later. Jeff, back to you.
Yeah, I think that's such good news that I got excited when you said somebody actually took advantage of the temporary buy down. I'm like, yes, finally, one person, But I think I have a question on the temporary buy down. Now, can that be used with this house hack strategy?
Yeah, I mean, you can do temporary buy downs on conforming loan amounts, and so yeah, exactly. I mean, you can buy one of these units, say a duplex, buy 5% down, live in one of the units. And again, if the property you're looking at making an offer on has been on the market a while, you're contemplating making a low ball offer, talk to somebody like me. I can give them all the numbers, which is what I did in this case I just described. They reviewed it, analyzed it, got comfortable with it. They went ahead and structured their offer using my numbers, and they were successfully able to get the deal approved, and they're now in an open escrow. So yeah, you can do that on an owner-occupied 2 to 4 unit purchase as well. Sure.
That's absolutely exciting stuff. Exciting stuff. Well, let's see. We still have a close. Oh, before I let you go on this and turn it over to this week's question or last week's question is, I know there are people, and I'm going to use that pool analogy. They're just standing on the side of the pool waiting for the water to warm up. Is that a mistake? I mean, I'm not trying to get you on there like, hey, to give legal or financial advice, but I'm just a gut feeling. Is that a mistake to wait because of what you just said? Is, listen, the agency has said we had a 5.8% increase in prices, so that's why the conforming loan amount went up so much. Isn't that a clue?
It's a very strong signal, and you're right. I mean, there's a lot of home buyers using your analogy. They're standing on that top step of that pool, and yeah, the water's cold on their feet and they're afraid to go in any further. I could be entirely wrong, but watched this for a lot of years. I really think you're better off not waiting and, get with somebody like us. We can, number one, determine if you can qualify at current rates. Because even with these temporary buy downs, you have to qualify at the note rate, not the first year rate. So in this, success story I'm describing, they were well qualified with a note rate if they had to go that direction. But I gave them another path to substantially lower their payment schedule for 3 years. So yes, I think this increase in conforming limit is a strong signal to those buyers who are waiting not just for rates to fall, but for home values to fall, that in hindsight, maybe that wasn't a great decision. And to me, that underscores why you should probably not wait much longer. Now, there's some press out there that says, no, when rates are falling, home values are going to fall. The inventory is going to be so, increase in the inventory is going to be so large, that's going to have to depress prices. I would again argue there's so much pent-up demand of buyers that I believe that the increase in inventory will be gradual. It won't be sudden. It's not going to go from 3 months inventory to 6. It's going to be gradual. With that, as lower rates bring in more prospective buyers, I think property values are going to remain stable and probably trend up further, not lower. So
Yeah,
that's
I,
my
I,
opinion.
I 100% agree. It's like toast. You put it in the toaster, it doesn't immediately become toasted. It takes a while. I think when people come in and they jump in and things start happening, it'll be a while. But in that meantime, boy, you could just be leaving money on the table.
Yeah,
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 lots of money on the table. So
absolutely right.
it reminds me of when people would say, "Hey, I'm going to wait to buy that big truck because of the gas prices." And when the gas prices come down, what did that big truck do? It went up in value.
Yeah,
And so it was more expensive. So what you waited for, you lost in the purchase price. So guys, make sure
exactly.
you call Art 760-883-5700. Make sure you call Art and get pre-approved, get ready to go, and then start looking for those opportunities out there because they are there, Art, are they not?
They are. They are. In
Yeah.
fact, we've got another success story. We have another transaction where, we pre-qualified the buyer. They made some offers, weren't successful. We've now got it submitted for underwriting and approved subject to a property. So now we're in a position where they can make an offer and offer a 15-day escrow because we've already got the loan underwritten and approved. It just needs an appraisal and a title report and a signed contract, and we can close.
Wow, that sounds almost like, hey, I can pay cash for your property kind of thing. There's no
That's what they're
reason to
competing
wait.
against. Yes, exactly.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, that's good news. Well, I want to turn it over back to you to talk about last week's closing question.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Yes, here's last week's closing question, and I'll repeat it for you. I'm looking to purchase a home and have substantial liquid assets, but limited monthly income. Will my substantial liquid assets help me qualify despite my limited monthly income? I get this question a fair amount where I'm telling somebody, hey, your income doesn't support meeting the debt ratio because your income's too low for the monthly mortgage payment. And sometimes they'll say, well, gee, I got $500,000 in the bank. Doesn't that help at all? Well, as I put on the first bullet point, definite maybe. So I want to just summarize very quickly, how is it that a large amount of money in the bank can help you qualify in terms of the monthly payment? Well, the first very common way, although it's a pretty minor way that it helps, is remember that when you have large liquid assets, again, non-retirement assets, we can use income derived from, actually it should read interest and dividend income derived from those liquid assets. That does require 2-year average from looking at your tax returns. But admittedly, that's not going to usually provide a lot of monthly recurring income unless your liquid assets are very substantial, that meaning probably in the millions of dollars. The other thing that we often do is if you have substantial liquid assets, including retirement accounts, specifically an IRA, as an example, we can set up a monthly recurring distribution from that IRA account. And based on your property price level you're contemplating, what your loan amount is going to be, we can calculate what that distribution per month is going to have to be in order to meet the debt ratio requirement. You request that from the administrator of the account. You get it set up. Once you receive the first distribution, we verify that, and then you're going to be able to close the loan just based on verifying you got that first monthly distribution received into your account. So that's a pretty popular way. In fact, I've got a transaction right now where we're relying on that in order to get the borrower qualified. Another way is Fannie Mae has a guideline for what they call employment-related assets as qualifying income. In this case, what it requires is if you have received either a large severance package or maybe a retirement package, and again, non-self-employment, that's what SE is, non-self-employment, but if you leave employment and you're going to get a large severance or a retirement package, we can take that amount of money, deduct from it what it's going to cost for down payment and closing costs, take the remaining portion, divide it by 360 months, and we can use that resulting number as monthly income for qualifying to meet a debt ratio. And then the last one is a concept called asset depletion, where it's similar to the Fannie Mae guideline. We take your net assets after deducting the down payment requirement, closing costs, and with some lenders, in particular the non-qualified mortgage, the non-QM space of programs, we can take that net asset amount and divide it sometimes by as little as 60 months. Many lenders are at 84 months, and again, then use that resulting monthly amount as your income to qualify to meet the debt ratio. So these are the ways that a large amount of money can help to some degree get you qualified if you have low monthly income. And with that, let me go ahead and go to the closing question for next week. I'll have Jeff pull it up. And the question is, and I've had this actually be requested before, or
Art,
question. Yes?
Art, I missed getting that in there. I apologize. Do you have that in front of you? I can pull it up.
I do. No, I do.
Sorry.
The closing question is, and I've had this, I was just asked this question about 10 days ago. I'm getting a conventional loan, and the question I had received was, I'm getting a conventional loan, and if I put 20% down, will I get a better rate than if I put less money down? So again, the question is, if I'm getting a conventional loan, will I get a better rate with 20% down than if I put less down? So next week, I'll have the answers. I'll have the answer to that question. It'll be on the house, and I think you'll be surprised by the answer. Jeff, back to you.
I feel like, this is the season. It's kind of like, okay, it's a holiday season. Some people call it Christmas. It started Hanukkah today. It's a gift-giving season. I feel like you have just shared a lot of gifts with us. And just like, it's kind of exciting. My wife loves to cook, and while she's cutting up the vegetables, I really don't smell much. But all of a sudden, that smell starts lingering through the house. And I'm like, yeah, that's good. It's the holiday season. I feel like you've given us a lot of good news today with that can really change people's lives going forward. And you want to make sure to reach out to Art. And his information is now coming up on the screen at 760-883-5700. Or, of course, you can call his cell phone. Sometimes I'll joke around and say that's his bat phone, but 714-612-9035. I'm going to be with Art this evening at an event. I'd love to hear that dude ring. So call Art at 714-612-9035. And, of course, you can always go to the website. He showed earlier how he has his rate grid up there. He updates that every day. And then, of course, you can email Art at art@mwloan.com. Art, fantastic information. I really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in a couple of hours. And then, again, we'll see you next week on Mortgage Minute.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching and listening to the Mortgage Minute by MortgageWorks, where we do have the answers, and they're on the house. So stay tuned for next week. Take care. See you later. Bye.